Happy September. It was reconnecting there for a second. I wasn't sure if it was going to connect my live. Happy September. It is time for Art in the AM on Labor Day, and I have had kind of a slower kind of morning, so I'm showing up here after my workout, no makeup, you know, all the things. So I'm going to go ahead and get started right away in my journal that I have been doing, that I really only have a few pages left in. I just have that little bit, and I think that I figured out I would finish by the end of October in this book. I have been doing a word of the week every week, and for September, what I've decided to do is kind of a series. There are 5 Mondays in September, and I'm going to do a series with the same image, and I'll show you what that is, and I'm going to do different art styles every Monday. These are just art styles that I came up with too. They aren't necessarily like the art styles that you might find in like an art history book or something, but I just wanted to explore like 5 different ways to work on the same image. And I'm going to do it inside of this little watercolor book. And the image that I picked doesn't necessarily fit on a horizontal landscape or a horizontal page, but I think that I'm going to make it work. And just, I'll show you the image and then you'll be able to see. So I'm going to go ahead and turn around my camera so that you are looking at the image rather than my sweaty face here. So here is the image that I am going to do every week, and I will tell you the 5 different art styles that I'm going to do. But here's the image that I picked. Look at that beautiful lion. And I love that it's in a profile. Anytime that you want to do a face of any kind, animal, person, I feel like a profile is a good way to start. So I'm going to show you how I am going to get that onto my paper here, onto this paper. Make sure it's turned the right way here. And I think that I'm going to do colored pencils, but I also got just like my regular pencils, because the style that I'm going to do today is realistic. I'm going to do a realistic lion, and that's quite a way to start, right? Is a realistic lion. I think I'm going to do it off to the side and line it up with the corner, so it's just going to get like this like main part of the face here. And what I'm actually going to do is to trace this image. You could do this with any image that you find, because this is your sketchbook. This is not something, this is just for you to practice. This is, you know, some people feel like it's not laying down flat here. Like tracing is not, you know, real art, but in your sketchbook, you can trace. It's not laying down flat, I think, because of like where I am in my journal. Because you're just like practicing. You're like practicing techniques. You're practicing, you know, different materials. So I lined up, this is graphite paper, and I'm going to lay it here in the corner. And usually what I just kind of do is to just kind of hold it in place. I don't tape it or anything. Hey there, Janet. A sample canvas. That sounds fun. So here is what I do when I am tracing. I don't trace everything. Like, I'm not going to trace all of these little hairs and everything. What I do trace is where the color changes. So you'll see as I'm kind of tracing here. So I'm using this little stylus. It has this little tiny end on it. So we went out for coffee this morning. There was a little local roaster that we had never been to before, and that was what we did this morning. And other than that, we really don't have any plans for today to do anything outside the house. And you can kind of see, I'm just kind of going around, and like here for the mouth, I'm going to kind of go around like where that darker kind of little area is. And the eye. And just kind of putting in like where some of the different color changes are. And I'm just kind of going, you know, where that general line of that lion is. And let's see, and then what I do is I kind of hold it in place, and then I will lift it up, see, to make sure that it's transferring there. And what I've found sometimes with graphite paper is when you put your finger down, sometimes the graphite will transfer to the paper, and I'll show you what I do for that. I saw, I think, Sue, hi Lori. And down in here where this changes, I'll kind of go in here. And that's all kind of darker down in there. So, and then I'm going to get a little bit of that where it changes a little bit. So let me see that I got most of the ear. I feel like I need a little bit more kind of inside the ear and a little bit under. So I'll kind of do this dark spot here. So the first week is realistic, and I am not going to finish this, I am sure, today, because whether I'm going to use pencils or color pencils, it takes a little bit to kind of build up. So I just had an idea of how I might kind of do that a little bit quicker, but I probably will not finish this. But today is the first style. Let's see. I think I need maybe a little bit kind of right in here. And do I have that one? And I'm just going to kind of do like a little bit right in here. Now, I could take this. Hey there, Judy. I know sometimes when it's a holiday, I do get different people because you're able to catch, you know, catch it live. So here is just the face. And so each week I'm going to do the same face in the same place, and it'll be 5 different styles. So if somebody wants to put these in the comments here, week 1 is realistic. So today is what, September 1st. Week 2, which will be September 8th, is natural. So I'm going to do a natural style. And week 3, which will be September 15th, will be rustic. That is just a style that I kind of made up. I'm going to show you rustic. So we'll see how that one goes with the lion. A rustic lion. There you go. Number 4, week 4, is going to be on September 22nd, and that is going to be abstract. So you do not want to miss, if you've ever wanted to figure out, how do I take something like this and make it abstract? And the last one, week 5, which will be on September 29th, it will be impressionist. You're probably familiar with like Van Gogh and different, you know, people kind of in that time period. And I'll talk a little bit about impressionism, but impressionist. So how do you take something like this and then make it impressionistic? So those are the 5 different styles that I'm going to do: realistic, natural, rustic, abstract, and impressionist. Realistic, natural, rustic, abstract, impressionist. Those are the 5 different styles, and I'm going to do all of them with this lion. Now you could do it with a flower, you could do it with an apple picture, you could do it with a turtle. Like, you could do this same thing. Just find yourself a picture, do this in your journal, and each week I'm going to do a different style. What I think I'm going to do, just to have this go a little bit quicker, I think I will put that kind of like right there so you can see, you know, kind of what I'm going by. I'm going to start with some watercolor. I just kind of had this idea to do a layered watercolor because, you know, I do love mixed media. I mean, I will do just drawings, you know, with just pencils, but I do love mixed media. And to get kind of these base layers of colors, I think that I'm going to do watercolor. And I think, you know, like a lot of these kind of colors will work well. And then I have some of these, like, especially like this color here, I think will work well for the lion. So I'm going to kind of start with some washes of watercolor. So out of those 5 different styles, oh good, Judy, I'm going to be posting inside of Art Journaling 101 the challenge for this month. And we're coming up to my 2 favorite, well, my 3 favorite months really. I love the October challenge in Art Journaling 101 because it's pumpkins. And then in November, it is leaves. And then in December, it is the Christmas card challenge. And that has been one of my favorite challenges that I've been doing since 2020. I've been doing that one for a little while. But I am curious, which one of those 5 different styles are you most interested? The realistic, the natural, rustic, abstract, or impressionist? Which one are you most interested in? So I'm going to start with the lightest color, the lightest value in here, which is kind of like this yellowish, right? So I'm going to do kind of like this golden kind of yellow here. And when I use watercolor, I know a lot of people will, well, I think I have some green on my paintbrush. A lot of people will spray their watercolors, and I don't do that a lot of times. I will just get some water in there and just like let it kind of get down into those colors and get down into the pigment of. So that's what I'm doing, is just taking some water on my brush and I'm putting it into the colors that I feel like I'm going to use. And we'll do a little bit in that one too. Most of them are on the darker colors. So I'm going to start with this kind of yellow, and I think I'm going to end up having some green in there because I had some green on my paintbrush. I am curious what you are doing today. What are you doing to, yeah, see that's, I'll just keep adding a little bit of water to it. It's a little bit greenish, but really that's, and I'm just kind of putting some of this where there's lighter. And then I'm going to be coming back in with the pencils anyway. So I'm going to be using the color pencils. And one of the things that you can do when you are doing watercolors like this, I didn't, but the graphite paper, you can take and erase it a little bit. Because as soon as you go over with the watercolors, it will not, you won't be able to erase it. And I'm not going to worry too much about, and this isn't my favorite eraser. You can see where it's kind of like blending. I usually like to use a different eraser. It works better if you do it before the watercolors. So I'm not going to worry about drawing it or brushing that off too much. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit darker color. So I'm going to switch over to kind of these. So this is what I think of when I'm thinking about realistic. I traced this one. I could take and grid it off. Usually that's how I do realistic. I will have a plastic sheet of paper that has a grid on it, like a 1-inch grid. And then this one, I will draw a grid over here and I'll draw it like that. Judy says whimsical. And that is not one of the styles that I have, but you will see my abstract turns pretty whimsical, right? Like abstract can kind of go different ways, and I tend to do more like abstract whimsical. So you will find that in week 4. I'm going to be doing more of that. So now I'm going to go into like this yellowy ochre kind of color, and I'm going to start looking for some of the areas that are a little bit darker. And I'm just kind of like laying some of that color in there. I'm going to blend this out a little bit. I really want to leave this white area or lighter area in there. And I'll show you, I may come back in and even do a little bit in there. I'm really just getting kind of like a base of color down on here so that then I can kind of go back in with the pencils and add a little bit more. And then I'll show you what I'm going to do with the background. That really is a little bit lighter in there. So I think I'm going to, if you take just clean water on your brush and you go over, you can actually lift that up. I put some water there or some paint there where I really didn't want to have any. And I'm going to do that, see if, gosh, my water is dirty. Okay. And then I'm going to go into a little bit darker than this. Kind of, ooh, that's very green. I think because my water is just very dirty. So I'm going to spray some clean water in my little thing here so that I can mix up some clean colors there. I've got kind of like a brown one. So let's see if I can pull this up a little bit. This journal has been really fun to be able to, it's a nice watercolor paper, and it is, it just works really well to try like a lot of different things on here. So I'm getting a little bit darker kind of in there, a little bit darker kind of behind his ear there. And I might even go a little bit. Really, I just want to kind of lay down a color so that when I go to do all of the color pencils, there's kind of like a base color there. So you see where I'm just kind of pulling out like the darker areas. And this is definitely darker than I have on here. And then I will do some darker. Ooh, I like that brown better. That one's kind of like a warmer kind of a brown. You know, Mondays, they end up being like one of my days that I create the most because I already kind of have my supplies and everything out to come on here. Do you have a day where you create the most? Or do you just have a time of day? I really would like to get, you know, to the point where I'm creating like every day, but that doesn't tend to happen. And do a little bit darker kind of in here. I think this is a black. Yeah, I don't want quite that dark. I dipped my paintbrush into some water, and I'm going to lift some of this up there. I don't want quite that dark. I'll put some of this darker kind of in here. His nose is definitely a little bit darker. Just a little bit of black in there. And that. I'm gonna, now that this is wet, I can kind of come back in and do some darker in there. Do a little bit darker, kind of like around his ear. And now that this is still wet, it kind of blends in with there. I just thought this would be kind of a quicker way to just kind of get a little bit of a start of color, and then I'll dry this a little bit and want a little bit kind of in here on his mouth. It's really light around in here, so I'll show you what I'm going to do with that. A little bit kind of darker around his eye there. And I have a little bit of paint left on my brush, so I'm just going to come in and start, you know, it's a little bit darker. This is already dry here, so I can kind of start putting some, you know, just like a little bit of kind of fur. I'll do like a little bit up in here. But when you are doing something, you know, you may have seen me do the face. Tell me if you saw when I did the Martin Luther King Day, I did the face and I painted upside down like this. And I'll tell you what happens is you start to see the shapes of the colors a little bit more, and it really does help. So if you are ever having a problem doing faces, I would highly suggest you paint upside down. I know it sounds really strange to think paint upside down, but it really does help to see the shapes of what you're painting rather than I'm looking for other areas where I wanted a little bit darker kind of in here. And I love how that kind of like blends together. And we've got a little bit kind of like running down there. And I'll do some of this kind of darker in there too. But this just kind of gives me like an overall like base coat for, oh yeah, Terry, it actually helps me to just break down the shapes more. I don't think about, I mean, I'm telling you around the eye, but I don't think about it like that. I just really see the shapes of like where the colors are. I see a little bit darker kind of in here, I think I want to add. But then I will show you what I'm going to do in the background is a complement to what I'm doing here, because it will really like start to show up more. So I've got a little bit of this darker kind of color. I'm coming over here because this is dry and doing, you know, just a little bit of a start of the darker kind of values in there. It's kind of starting to look like a lion, right? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and dry this. I'm going to use my little heat gun, heat tool. Whenever you're using watercolor, you really do need to kind of dry it between layers, and you'll kind of start to see this paper is buckling a little bit because this heat tool is really, really hot. But afterwards, I can kind of flatten it out so it doesn't really bother me too much. But especially around the edges when I have it dry. And if there's too much paint there, sometimes I will just like lift it up. I'll talk to you about realistic or impressionistic, I guess, you know, in week 5. But really, a lot of this, where I'm just kind of pulling out the blocks of the colors, is how the impressionists really develop that style. It's almost kind of like squinting your eyes and just seeing like the blocks of the color. So what I'm going to do in all of this background here is I'm going to do a complementary color. These are mainly oranges, so I'm going to do a blue because blue is across from orange on the color wheel. If I was doing a basically yellow, like if you did a yellow flower and you wanted to do it realistic, if you did like a sunflower, right, and you wanted to do it realistic, you could do kind of a purplish background, a bluish purple, and have it darker, and then this would really pop. If you were doing something that was green, I don't know, a turtle, mainly green, then you could do more of like a reddish or a pink background. Anytime you do like those complementary colors, they're really gonna stand out. So I'm going to do just kind of like this kind of bluish, maybe with some purple in the background. And I have a purple over here that I like. This set of watercolors that I use, where did I put is this 42 set of watercolors. And it has a little guide on the back right here. I've never painted like little swatches for all of these colors, but they do match up. So, and they do have the name. So if I look at this purple that I really wanted to use, it's C19. It is called Mauve? Manvy? They're really tiny words. They're hard to read. But that's the purple that I like to use. And then there are several blues in there. And I will probably use a combination of a lot of those. Let's start with some purple. And I'm going to put some on the back here where it's dry. And especially kind of like around. Oh, see how I got down into the paint after the water had kind of been in there and it's a little bit darker. And I'm going to do that kind of like along this side here too. Now see, if this was still wet, it would blend into it. It would blend and bleed, and then you would get purple coming into the lion. So that's why I really wanted to have it nice and dry. I'm going to do a little bit more of that purple. I think for travel watercolors, these are a really good set of pretty vibrant, like I feel like I can get a pretty decent color of watercolor with these. You know, they're just really vibrant, intense, pigmented colors, I feel like. And I have enough. Oh, look at how dark that is in there. I have enough of this purple paint down in there. So now I'm getting down into the paint and my brush is pretty dry. And that's why I'm getting kind of a darker, more intense color there, which I really like. And I kind of like the texture. And now I'm going to come in with a little bit of blue. So you see how that just makes that lion there like pop? It makes it like really stand out. And now adding in some blue. Let's see if I have enough in this one. Oh, that's almost kind of like a bluish, a blue violet. What color, what number is this? C33. Let's see what that one is. Oh, yeah, ultramarine. I must use this one a lot because there's not very much of this paint left in here. I have a little bit kind of coming around in there. And then let's go into a different blue. Oh, he's up here. Yeah, so they are definitely really good for traveling. I think I like this color too. Oh yeah. I just wanted like another blue in there. And I may still, when I go to do more of the background, I may kind of do something else with this. I have an idea for what I want to put in here. But I just kind of wanted to do some blues. I'm kind of going over some of this purple. Yeah, and the nice thing about these, they do have a little piece of felt, I guess, a little sponge, and then this mixing tray, which I haven't cleaned off, but that works really well to have that too when you're traveling. Okay, so for realistic, it means, you know, as much as you can with the material that you're using, having it look realistic. It kind of means not taking a lot of artist license, I guess, to interpret it as much the way that you might want. And we'll talk about that like with the other styles. So realistic really is staying pretty much with the, you know, whatever it is that you're painting, just in the material, right? Like I'm not going to be able to get as realistic with watercolors maybe as I would if I was using pencils, if I was using acrylic paint. Okay. I kind of like this like fun background, but I think what I'm going to do, it's a little too dark. I may end up adding some white over top of this to just kind of, it depends on how realistic this is. I might like this background, but I'm thinking it's a little bit dark, but I like the colors of all the blues and the purples and stuff that are in there. So we'll see once I get more of this done. So what I'm going to do, I want to let this dry completely. And, oh yes, the brush that comes in here, it does come with a brush on the side. And I don't use that one that often. I think I have it over here somewhere though. Yeah, you keep the water right in the brush, right? So it makes it really easy to travel with because you have the water. I've taken the water from, like when I've been on a plane and I've taken the water out of there and I put it into my paintbrush to be able to use my watercolors. And it works. And you have just like a little bit of water and you can squirt out the amount of water, hi there, Laura, that you want. So that has that background. That's where I'll put the word realistic, right? And then probably what I will do for all 5 of the weeks is to do a similar color in the background, depending on how I do the abstract and the impressionist, and what were the other one? The rustic, the natural, and the realistic. So I'm going to leave this to let it dry completely before I start doing any more. And probably what I will do is turn on the camera and do a quick little hyperlapse as I'm finishing out and making it look realistic like this one. And I'm going to be using my Prismacolor color pencils, and I'll be doing that with the when I do the hyperlapse. But I just want to let this dry completely. Even with the heat gun, sometimes what that's doing is just drying the surface and not all the way through. So I want to let it dry completely, and I'll kind of flatten it out a little bit more. But that is the start of realistic. Using tracing paper, especially in your journal, is perfectly okay. You can work your way up to learning how to draw more realistically, because that's like a whole different thing. But you can start with a tracing like that and then use an image that you're using for the reference to pull out the blocks of the color. to pull out where the areas are. And you saw me trace with the stylus, and because I did that, I can kind of see the little lines pressed into the paper, but I can reuse this week after week now. I don't need to put this onto a piece of tracing paper. I just traced around where the blocks of the color are. You know, the darker area of the color inside this shape right here, right? You don't call it an ear, but inside this shape right here and inside this shape, and, you know, and just drawing the shapes of the colors. And I will tell you, once you start learning how to, like, you really want to draw it instead of trace it, you can turn this image upside down. That was how I taught my high school students, was to turn the image upside down to draw it. And it keeps you from naming all of the areas. You really just start looking at the shapes and how they relate to the shapes beside them. And so there's an extra little tip for you of how to draw realistically, is to turn things upside down. I'm going to be able to finish this with my colored pencils, and I'll do a hyperlapse, so look for that later. And remember, this and the other 4 videos for September that are going with this series of the artist styles will all be on my YouTube. They are in a playlist for Word of the Week, so they're easy to find on YouTube. If you are not already subscribing to my YouTube, just put YT in the comments anytime you want the link to be able to follow my YouTube, and I will put that, because here on Facebook they will only remain visible for 30 days. Over on YouTube you'll be able to see them and be able to find that list for all of the Word of the Week videos over there, and I'll do the hyperlapse and you'll be able to see that over there too. So I hope all of you have an awesome Labor Day, that you have fun, whatever it is that you're doing, even if that means doing absolutely nothing, right? So I will see you next week for Art in the AM, when the style will be natural. And that's what I will be doing next week. So thank you all for showing up, and I will see you next week.